Are you ready? Okay, calling to order the meeting, the Board of Trustees meeting for October 13th, the Helen Plum Library. May we have the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sarah, can we have a roll call? Here.
Vice President Ken Marshall.
Here.
Treasurer Kristen Adams Walsh.
Here.
Secretary Julie Kowalski Schmidt.
Here.
Trustee Jennifer Erickson.
Here.
Trustee Kelly Sims.
Here.
Trustee Sue Wiggins.
Here.
Director Claudia Krusty.
Okay, do we know if there's any public comment?
There is none that I
None that you were aware of? Great. Okay, may I have a motion for adoption of the agenda?
I move to adopt the agenda.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, action item 6. Okay, so may I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda items?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda items.
Second.
Any discussion on the consent agenda items? Okay. All in favor of approving the consent agenda items, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, are we on to the next item? So committee reports? So who would speak for the audit committee? Is that you can?
I'm the chairman of the audit committee. We did meet. We went over several days worth of closed minutes, discussed them and voted to release the majority of the minutes that we discussed and to keep others closed at the present time.
And I believe they're one of the action items under new
Correct,
business.
and we'll have to vote on that later in this meeting.
Okay, Director Relations Committee.
We did meet in September to discuss the executive director review cycle and process, and we will meet again on October 25th.
Great, and the Policy and Bylaws Committee.
We did meet to discuss a few things, which I believe we are voting on today. One of the biggest things being this bond thing, which nobody is expected really to read.
But we will discuss.
I tried to make my way through.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and is there any unfinished business left to be discussed? Okay, moving on to new business. So Jamie Bracklin is here to do a presentation for us. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I can add a preface because Jamie and I had several conversations. We, in the future, if not next November, but after that, want to get in our 5-year planning cycle. We still have a tremendous number of unknowns with our construction project. So what Jamie is going to do, I think, is kind of set the level, I don't want to say playing field, but the level of understanding as to the process we've gone through so far and what's still upcoming for our fiscal year responsibilities and handle any questions that you might have. I think this is an orientation that we could use every single year because the terms are not particularly familiar. And each time we go over them, I think we gain a little bit deeper understanding and the process gets a little easier. So I'm turning it over to you, Jamie. Thank you.
So I'll stand up.
Jamie, oh, well, all right. Jamie Radcliffe is our financial advisor. You may recognize him from all of the consult and work that he did for us on the bond issue. We work with Jamie, I would say, in strategic planning for our financial picture, and we work with our accountant on the tactical day-to-day sorts of things. So we use both of these advisors, and Jamie's invaluable.
So good evening, everybody. And Claudia thought that it would be good to have just sort of a baseline review of the levy and the process. You've heard this before. It never hurts to hear it. Before I forget, if you're signed up for ILA. And tomorrow, I'm going to do sort of a deep dive into the levy at 1 o'clock. So if you're signed up for that and you care to listen to my presentation, I would love to have you. So, and you'll see some of this stuff tomorrow as well. But and this will, as Claudia also said, this will dovetail into the 5-year projection that we've been using to project out how much you could pay for the bonds, how much revenue you have. And we're just not to that point just yet where we know what the expenditures are going to look like. So as the year unfolds, as you start knowing more, as we get into the new library, that'll become much more clear and much more concrete. So we're not talking about 5-year plans or outlooks just yet. Tonight, we're just going to focus on the levy. And so why do we care about the levy? Well, pretty much all of your money comes from the property tax levy, as you know, some 95% or more or less. And so if we don't get the levy right, it can have serious consequences for you. The levy is part of an entire process that you've been going through, right? This happens every single year. You have to adopt a budget appropriation for the year. And you put that notice in the paper, you wait 30 days, you have a hearing, and then you adopt your budget and appropriation ordinance actually by the 4th Tuesday in September, which just happened to be September 30th. In this
We've done
presentation.
those first 3 steps.
Yes.
Right.
And so you're well along the way. And that B&A ties into the levy in the sense that it sets sort of the upper limit for the levy. You can't levy more than you've appropriated, because how could you spend it if you haven't appropriated? So we have to make those two match up. The appropriation, I think, more of as the expenditure. The levy is more the revenue piece, right? So when you set the appropriation, it's more about how much you're going to spend, although you do appropriate the revenues as well. The levy is more how much are we going to generate from our property tax levy. Now, it gets a little confusing because your appropriation is not your budget, right? Because remember, the appropriation sets the most you could possibly spend category by category for every single area of the library. So if you add up all the max, it's going to be way more than you actually are going to spend. So separately, you have a budget, which which Claudia is going to track, and it's going to say how much do we actually intend to spend. So just don't get those two things intertwined.
And we've talked about this too. The appropriation is our legal spending limit. What you see every month in our financial reports is our working budget. And when this gets filed, we say any surpluses will be transferred to the special reserves or capital reserves or whatever. So the unspent between those two, we acknowledge that it will be moved to a reserve fund.
So I think I've kind of said this already. We don't have to dwell on this too much, but the levy determines the amount of taxes that are going to be extended. And the calendar for that, just so you have it in your head, is it has to be passed by the 2nd Tuesday in December, which most people are ahead of that, and filed by the 4th Tuesday in December. So this is what goes to the county, and you submit that to the county. The county goes through its own calculation of what you're allowed to levy. And the key there is that, let's see, if I do my old question order.
You're at the
Yeah.
third bullet.
What's that?
You're at the third bullet.
Yeah, but the third bullet, I was just trying to see if I want to do it slightly different. But so when you submit your levy, the county goes through and does a calculation of what's the maximum. And if you've requested more than the maximum, they're going to cut you back to the maximum that's legally allowed under what we call the Property Tax Extension Limitation Act. There's a formula. If you ask for less, right, than you're legally allowed to get, well, the county clerk doesn't care. They're going to say you levy less, we're going to give you less. And so as a result, most districts, if they want to make sure they capture enough, will levy up to the maximum amount that they can. Without having to do a hearing, what we call the truth in taxation hearing. And what you've done, that's actually 5%, which you've typically done in prior years, is you take the prior year's extension, increase it by 4.9%. And that's what you put in your levy. Why? Because it's pretty sure that that's going to be more than this maximum formula that the county clerk calculates. And that way you can be sure that you're not losing any revenue from year to year. Next year, it may be a different story because we're facing some very high CPI, but you can address that simply by having a hearing, right? You can increase the levy to try and make sure you capture everything under the formula. And the only thing is you have a hearing, and that's the total thing that you have to do. Not to go on about this for too long here, but if you did screw up, you know, if someone said, oh, what if we screwed up and we accidentally put in our levy more than 105% of what was extended for taxes last year, it doesn't really matter. The only punishment that you have is the county can't, it has to disregard anything that was above the 105%, even if you could get it, which you never can, so it doesn't really matter. All right, so the limiting tax rate, that's what when I talked about what the county goes through the calculation, that's how they do it. They calculate the maximum tax rate for you. And if your levy exceeded that, caused your tax rate to exceed that. All right, so this is the way it works, and I think this makes it pretty clear. So the max, your request, right, in the levy, this is what you're going to do with the levy. You're going to take last year's extension, what was actually on the tax bill, and you're going to increase it by 4.9%. And that comes out to 8.004 million, right, more than 8. And that's because last year you extended $7,630,482. Okay, so you're going to put that in your levy, but when the county goes through and does its calculation, right, the way this isn't exactly how it does its calculation, but effectively it's what happens. They'll take that prior year extension, they'll increase it by inflation, because you get inflation every year according to the formula. And then on top of that, so you see the times 1.014, because that was CPI last year, 1.4%. And then you get to tax new property. New property is not inflation on your home. That doesn't count as new property. New property is real new building, like a new store or a new home built from scratch.
The new condos.
Or new condos. Real stuff that didn't exist before that's now on the tax rolls, and you get to tax that at your tax rate. And your tax rate does move around a little bit, but not very much from year to year. So you get to tax that, and you can either calculate that tax, or we looked historically, it's been around 0.7% every, historically. So we add that in, and so if you take the 1.4% plus the 0.7%, that would be a 2.1% increase. And that sort of tells me what you're likely to get on the tax rolls for the actual extension. So you're going to ask for that 8.004 million, but you're probably going to get something closer to that 7.791 million. And then, of course, don't forget, sometimes people won't pay their taxes, so you don't necessarily collect 100% of that. So when we're doing a projection, we might put in a little factor to allow for people who might not pay their taxes. So that's a lot right there, but is it clear?
Yeah.
The question, just what does acronym TICL mean?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So truth in taxation law. Yeah. So that's the one where if you go over 5% increase over last year's tax extension, not your last levy, by the way, right? It's not over, that 8.004, whatever that was last year. It's over what's actually on the tax bill.
Okay.
And if you don't, you just have to have it here.
Is it what's on the tax bill, the 7.6?
So what was on the tax bill last year was the 7.6. Right, that was last year's tax extension. And what we're estimating is that with the formula, this year, it's gonna end up to 7.791. But just in case we're wrong and somehow we missed an extra % of new property or something like that, we're gonna ask for the 8.0. So that we're covered.
And I just add one thing, when we're actually doing the budget, the 7.6, that's after the tax increment financing is subtracted from the tax revenues the county collects, so.
Say that again,
So
please.
there are 4 tax increment financing districts.
Okay.
So the actual revenue that the library, that the county collected was about 199,000 more than that 7.6.
Oh,
So we see something that is, whatever the total was, less than 199. Now, what happens in Lombard, some of that comes back to us, you'll see on the revenues on the budget, you'll see TIF rebate.
Right.
So about 90-some thousand of that TIF is coming back to us because there's a very old increment financing district that's about to expire. But the question about the tax increment financing, you need to be aware of that if there's one due to expire. Particularly at some point in the future when you look at a possible levy reduction. I just want you to remember some of this because that's an important time. You don't want to align those two. You want to align a future levy reduction in a year that's not a TIF expiration. So
Got
there's 3 of those coming up in the next 3 or 4 years and the one that's 20-some years away. Jamie, I am going to ask this question for myself and any of you because 2 years ago, the trustees opted for a flat levy.
Yeah.
And in
That's what I
that
was gonna
case, we left an ability to tax new property out of the equation, correct?
Yeah, well, sort of. I mean, it's a little bit of mixing and matching there, but remember that what we said in this formula, which might not have registered with you because I didn't make it clear, is that the base for that calculation that the county does is the prior year extension. Okay, so they're always going to go back to the prior year extension. If you didn't capture, which is your point, if you didn't capture just because you decided not to or whatever, everything that was available to you under that formula so that you were below the maximum and that became the extension, that would be the number, even though it wasn't the maximum you could have got. That lower number becomes the number in the top for the next year. So if it was lower, it's going to be lower. You can't go back to that higher number. You can't capture that inflation in a future year. Once you gave it up, you've basically given it up.
And we knew that when we did it, but at the time, we weren't building anything, we weren't ready to build anything, and we'd already been sort of saving money for this project, so we knew, right, so that, we did make that decision.
You were fully informed.
We were.
yes.
Yes, we were. Okay, I remember that, absolutely.
And that's kind of it. I think, this was just a recap. You're going to do your appropriation and your budget, then you do the levy. And once you submit the levy, it's out of your hands. The county calculates the extension, does the collection. And there is something I'm keeping an eye out for you. There is a law out there that allows you to capture prior refunds, but no one's really sure how it's gonna come. So if there was a tax refund from a prior year, you'd be able to capture that. No one knows how it's gonna work, so.
Does this make sense to everybody?
It does.
Well, and what's
Well, I want to go back though to that was one of my questions actually. So our decision 2 years ago to not raise the levy. And I know that I remember that's money we're not getting back. So how is that impacting us? That wasn't just money we're not getting back that year. That's money that what out of the formula here have we lost?
Right.
So that 7.6 is lower than it would have been.
Exactly. Yep.
How much
there's-
lower do we
I don't
know?
know how much you left.
I don't remember the
But if
details
it was
about it.
a percent, let's say, which, you did a flat rate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I
you did a
think we
flat
did a
rate. So
flat.
basically what you did was you took your extension from the prior year and left it. the same,
Yes.
I think. I have to go back to the explanation.
Or was it
Yeah,
1%?
Yeah, we didn't feel good about
instead of
taxing
2?
the community when we weren't ready to.
I feel like we felt like we owed the that to the taxpayers
Mhm.
because we hadn't given them anything.
Well, we just weren't
We
using
weren't
like
using
using
the
like the
money,
funds, and it
right.
was like, we're at a status quo. so,
Right.
like, yeah, we weren't gonna grab any, take any more.
Take any more money,
Right,
yeah.
request any more when we were at a standstill.
So the bottom line is that we saved the taxpayers money that year by not increasing the levy.
Yeah.
Because we had to start another building yet, and it has been said, and we were collecting money, so taxpayers should realize that by not raising the levy, we did save them money that year.
Yep, and that saving is gonna carry forward for every future year. If I had to guess, tell you what, rather than guess, and put a number in your head, I'll just go back tomorrow and I'll look and I'll see what the difference is between what
Yeah.
the extension was.
Well, and
And I'll-
Roger Richmond had sent it to us, I know, Jamie, and I think we talked about it last year, but I don't remember the number.
Well, and I know
More
that,
than 50,000, less than 100,000.
okay, and I know at the time it was an extended and thoughtfully made decision,
Right.
just for those of you who weren't on the board at the time.
No, we did.
It was, yeah, extensive, and then we very much knew the implications to the future.
Because it carries forward.
It does carry forward, right, but it seemed like it was the best
The right
At
thing
the
to do.
time.
decision at
right,
the time, and I'm
yeah.
sure it still does. I just didn't need to visualize it at this point.
Yeah, I'm not
because
having any
it's-
regrets about our decision.
No, I'm not either. I just need to fully be reminded of it and
So you see
understand
how,
it.
but do you understand how it works in this?
Yes,
law?
I do. Yes.
The other thing I would say is what's before you today is a resolution that we will put in for 4.9%. What you'll see next time to vote on is the levy at the November meeting, and we'll use that factor of 4.9% and get to the 8.004. And again, that's not what we're going to get because the CPI is sitting at 1.4. We know that already. So make sense?
Yes.
Okay. We're gonna have 4.9% on the resolution today, we're not gonna get 4.9%. But when you revisit this next year, the CPI is gonna be above 5%, and that's a different discussion. We'll have that then. And hopefully have a little more solid information on how our project's going, what's going on with salaries.
And what we'll actually need.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good.
okay, thank you so much, Jamie. Anybody else have anything? for Jamie? Okay. So, no, Claudia, am I right? We need a motion for this next action because it's a resolution or it's a, thank you. It's a roll call vote as well. Okay. Can I
I
have a-
move for the approval of resolution 2021-2022-004 to determine estimate of funds needed for 2021-2022 fiscal year.
I second.
Is it a roll call vote?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't do with money.
Mhm.
President Allison Goodwin,
Yes.
Vice President Ken Marshall,
Yes.
Treasurer Kristen Hansen Walsh,
Yes.
Secretary Julie Walsh Smith,
Yes.
Trustee Jennifer Erickson.
Yes.
Trustee Kelly Ann Sims.
Yes.
Trustee Sue Wiggins.
Yes.
Okay, so motion passed. Okay, may I have a motion for action item C?
I move for the approval of resolution 2021-2022-003, adopting a disclosure compliance policy, including new policy B16, debt disclosure compliance policy.
Okay, so this was one of the policies you discussed.
I second.
Thank
From the policy
you.
committee, yes.
Okay. Any discussion on the debt disclosure compliance policy?
I have a couple comments. to
Okay.
say. First of all, the language is very legal in its tone. This is drafted by our attorneys at Chapman and Cutler, who are our bond attorneys. I asked Jamie to stay and that you have any questions about this. The recommendation is we take this language as they have written it. And I spoke with our auditors about exactly this. Is there a simpler way or a better way that's more layman's terms? And their recommendation was we get this on the books as given. The only reason you're seeing this as both a resolution, the resolution itself has it's an exhibit or an attachment, exhibit A. The language of the policy is a duplication of exhibit A. And it simply allows us to get it in the policy manual because our resolutions get filed. This is a one-time resolution, not an annual. And it's going to live in our resolution files for 2021-22. But we will have an obligation for this compliance annually. And by putting it in the policy manual and cross-referencing the ordinance, I think that will keep us on track in the future. So it seems a little convoluted, but that's the reason. We are sitting with some resolutions on the books from prior years, sexual harassment resolution, travel and training resolution, that aren't part of our verbatim part of our policies or cross-reference. We're going to start cross-referencing, but I hope that makes sense. Now, questions about this?
No, just a comment. I did read Exhibit A, and it is full of legalese, as you said. And we went over this at length at our policy bylaws meeting. And I had some questions regarding the term the district, because in my view, the way the district, the term the district, those two words are used in the body of Exhibit A. I thought there could be some confusion with regarding whether the district means the board of trustees or the district means the executive director. We talked about that, and I was assured by the executive director that that language had been vetted by Chairman Cutler, and I think you said one other thing also. I think-
Well, I had said I had actually found this verbatim in some other North Suburban villages. Clearly, they have the same lawyers. And other places as well, where their financial policies have this word for word. The other thing I would tell you is this is not separate from our bond ordinance, which was that very lengthy, I don't know, it's 112 pages or whatever. It is really our commitment to comply with our fiscal responsibility to report our status as the status of our financial health, if you will. And in the bond policy, it says as designated by, it names the executive director or the agent designated. And I'll tell you, Jamie, one of the obligations we have is when our audit is completed, and that audit report will be before you for vote in November, I believe, if we're on track. Within 10 days of that, Jamie will file that as needed and as required, so that we are on target with reporting the financial health of our organization. Correct me if I'm getting this wrong.
Yep, no, that's exactly right. And then there's actually some additional information that also has to be filed prior to the end of January, like January 26th, but we'll do that at the same time.
And this is our first year through. So if Jamie works with us in year 2, year 3, year 4, this starts to feel really routine and we know what we're doing, then we'll continue on our own. But we'll have to do it for the duration of the bonds upon repayment every year. And the policy says we're committed to doing that.
So Ken, you said the issue you had with it was just that it's, we're referred to as the district throughout?
Yeah.
But even though it's defined,
Quite a bit in there.
Yeah, that's fine, but again, my misgivings were slight, and being assured that it's been cleared by legal
Right.
counsel. I'm also assuming that on the outside chance something happens, legal counsel has malpractice insurance. So, no, I believe that, again, slight misgivings were pretty much taken care of by the explanation that the executive director provided. And so I went along with it, but again, it's, I mean, I'm a retired attorney, believe me, the legalese in there is somewhat baffling even to me, although I was not an attorney in this particular area of practice, bond law. But anyway, we approved it at the policy and bylaws committee, and I recommend that we go ahead and approve it here today.
okay, so that's then, any other questions? That's the next item, is to have a vote on this, passing this resolution.
Just a yay, nay.
Is it a roll call?
It's no money.
No, so we do not,
It's just a
okay.
commitment to be paid ourselves.
Okay, so all in favor of this, of passing this resolution, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
And Jamie, you're welcome to stay.
Thank you, Jamie, for coming. See you soon, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Good, thanks, everybody. Have a
Good night. Okay, I need a motion on the action item approval of updated and new policies.
I move for the approval of updated new policy number U-1, use of materials and facilities, and B-17, bond record keeping policy.
I second.
Okay, did there need to be any additional discussion on these?
I would just note that we reviewed these items extensively again at the policy and bylaws committee meeting, and we vetted everything. I think that it was well put together by the staff, and we didn't have any issues with it, except this minor, very, very minor punctuation or grammatical changes. So I, again, will recommend that people who are approved.
Okay, if we're ready, it's not a roll call vote, so all in favor of passing the policy?
I would do a roll call on this only because we're eliminating
The bond?
fines.
Oh, because of the money, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Sarah, I'm gonna do a roll call?
President Allison Pickett-Boyd,
Yes.
Vice President Kim Marshall,
Yes.
Treasurer Kristen Walsh,
Yes.
Secretary Julie Kowalski Schmidt,
Yes.
Trustee Jennifer Erickson,
Yes.
Trustee Kelly Ann Sims,
Yes.
Trustee Sue Wiggins.
Yes.
Okay, and the final action item regarding the opening closed session minutes of the assorted dates.
I
Do we
move
have a
for the
motion?
opening of closed session minutes of January 20th, 2021 board meeting, February 9th, 2021 audit committee meeting, February 10th, 2021 board meeting, May 10th, 2021 director relations committee, and May 12th, 2021 board meeting.
I second.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, not a roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, next is communications. Did we receive any? No? Doesn't appear to be any, okay. And then Claudia, the library director's report, if you want to add anything.
I have just a couple things, and some of these are more of a heads up. I will be sending you an email for the on-site visits at the construction site. The 2 days we have, and you don't have to write this down, I'll send them out. October 15th, which is this Friday. This Friday. Did I do that right? October 22nd.
Next Friday.
Yes.
Yeah, Friday we're doing this signing.
Yeah, October 22nd. Excuse me. October 22nd and November 12th. We're gonna aim for 2:30, 3, or 3:30. And only 2 trustees at a time, so we won't violate open meetings act. Hard hats required, closed-toed shoes, preferably reinforced. If those dates and times do not work for you, please don't worry, I'll be back in touch with you to find something that will work. But that'll be coming. And then
Excuse me, will we be signing up for those? or
you,
I
well,
think
you
it
know
only
what,
gets
it's
to
gonna be
that
informal, it's gonna be, I know, Ken and Allison are able to come at 3 o'clock on the 22nd, and, Julie and Sue are able to come at 2:30 on the 12th of November. And if 2 slots are filled, I'll let you know, and we'll do a half an hour later, but I don't think we're gonna take more than a half an hour for 1 or 2 people. And again, if none of those times work for you, we'll find another time that will. So a little informal, but I'll be reaching out to you. The next thing, I'm just gonna mention this, we had questions at our community conversations as expected, and I'm sure you've probably had questions too about when are we gonna begin or continue the conversation about what do we want to do with this building. And so this is just an update. Sue and I are going to, in the next coming weeks, revisit the IGAs, which of course we looked at, and I'm sure we looked at several years ago, but to really refresh and ensure that we've got all of the legal requirements that we must follow so we can begin the conversation. I think it's going to take some time, so we're going to start with that, but we'll start that conversation. I hope we'll be back with this summer in November for you.
I thought it was just the park district had first right.
The Park District has first rights of refusal, but there's some other things I think we have to be sure we have clarity on. For example, the parking adjacent to us that we share with Elmhurst Memorial Healthcare. There are agreements with Elmhurst Memorial Healthcare that if we, at some point in the future, sell to a nonprofit or government, the parking agreement carries over. If we sell to a for-profit, it does not. So we need to go over all that with the fine-tooth comb.
And the lot across the street too.
And we have to look at the details on that. And then there's a question about the lot to the west. Because that's not part of those intergovernmental agreements.
It is not.
So it's a
And there's
little,
also still zoning issues,
Right.
and there's
Yeah.
also air
Right.
rights issues, so there's a lot.
The air rights issue is just this building.
Correct.
It is
Right.
not next door.
right. But what we want to do is revisit all of those things that we are aware of that will factor into what our options might be. And yes, Park District has rights of first refusal, but we also have to identify, do you as a library board want to make rights of first refusal for this and the adjacent? So there's a lot coming
A
up.
lot of
And
details.
you know
to it.
what, I want to give you a heads up right now that we're going to start bringing this up in November. So,
I mean, I thought Paul Frederickson had already verbally said because of, the building at Madison Meadows, they don't have any money.
you know what, we have to officially go through the channels to give them a chance to answer us in writing.
In writing.
Yes,
Mhm.
we need
to be released of that
Yes,
obligation,
yes,
and if that be
yes.
the case.
Yes,
The process would be, they need to get an appraisal, we need to get an appraisal. If
Right.
they don't meet up, then we need to get an
A joint
independent appraisal.
or they.
What
could
if they've
say-
changed their mind?
Or
They
they say,
just
we
say-
don't want an
They
appraisal.
could say we
don't
don't
want
want an appraisal, but we would need that in a legally, I don't wanna say certified document to say we have done what the IGA required of
Right.
us. Now what's our next step?
So we're gonna start that now, even though we're still gonna be in this building for another
Yes.
year?
And I will tell you, when we were working with John Mentz on acquisition of the Main Street properties,
Yeah.
his take is we've probably got a couple of years cycle in this, and I told him we weren't gonna probably be able to visit it till our new trustees were on board, and we got through some of this budget cycle that we've been going through, and then we would start the conversation, and he did not think that was any too soon, because it's gonna take some time.
Right. And what you're saying, Claudia, is you're going to begin to compile
Yes.
all of the obligations we have
Yes.
for handling the assorted.
Step one
Lots.
is what's required of us and what questions do we need to answer? What do you need to consider? What are your options? What are your choices? What do you not have a choice on? You must do first. So we're gonna start documenting.
I would-
But we gotta go
Well,
back and
and
revisit.
I think we need to start thinking about what questions we have of you too.
Sure.
Well, I
because
think once you've educated us as to what our obligations are, then we really could.
Right.
And then one of the things that Keith Genario suggested was we do a study, which is something they did when they were, and I thought that was a really good idea, but once we know what our obligations are, we could look at that and then see what are even the possibilities before
And
we
we
start.
may do that internally,
Right.
and,
Right.
you know, do our own situational analysis. I think we've got a really good, solid working knowledge of the
Yeah.
situation. And
Yeah,
I think it's beneficial for all of you, but it's also gonna be beneficial for the community, because that is gonna probably be the next interesting topic for the community to,
right.
where are we getting the questions that we have about this building?
Because if the
Now,
park
when
district
you
says no,
put
then
together-
what? Then who are we looking
Well,
at?
and I mean, I'd like to back a big picture though is, do we want to sell the property is
Yeah,
number one?
absolutely.
And I'm not saying we don't,
Right.
but I think as a board, we owe it to
We have
to
that
the
decision to
community
make,
to
for sure.
start at step number one. And it may be an easy, yes, we do, of course we do, but
Well, I think
I
that's
would
what
like a
Claudia's saying, our
summary.
having that information.
I would love to hear a summary of the community,
Conversation questions?
because I listened to one of them and there was not a single question, which I was shocked
You
at.
listened to the last one,
So I would love a summary of the other,
some of the questions.
well,
And you know
There
what?
was only one on this topic, but
Yeah.
yeah, we do have a summary of.
I'm just curious.
But sometimes too, it's the question that's asked of the reference staff, reference desk. It's the question that's asked of us when we're out in the community. I don't want to spend too much time on this tonight.
Yeah.
I want you to be thinking of the questions you have, and I want you to know we're committed to really digging in and revisiting
Yeah.
on behalf of our new trustees, or newer trustees, and on behalf of all of you, because there's a lot there. It's a little bit tangled.
Yeah,
And it's going to take some time and some work on our part. So
Just to close this off with my 2 cents. First of all, we are not obligated to sell the property to anybody. For now, number two, the park district having the right of first refusal doesn't mean that they automatically are going to get the property. If we have this property appraised that comes out to X and somebody else offers us X plus Y, and the park district can't pay X plus Y, they don't have the right to say, well, this is the appraised value.
You know
We can
what?
get more for it.
in the IGA, it's spelled out what we must do. They get an appraisal, we get an appraisal. If we're too far apart, we jointly get an independent third-party appraisal and accept those results. So that's what I mean, when we come back to you, we're gonna say, here's where we are. And be patient with us, because you pull these out and your eyes start to cross.
Mhm.
Yeah, so, and we're gonna have to get a little bit of legal counsel on this too, and so it'll depend on their schedule.
Well,
But
I personally don't want you to feel rushed because you have
We
like 20 million other things on your plate. So
but here's
when
the,
you bring it up and I can only speak for myself. When you bring it up and I come back with questions, they're just questions I have. I personally, and I totally respect what John Menz is saying, and I fully believe we need to start thinking about the process.
It takes some
But I
time.
also want you to feel
But we have
that
time.
you're fitting it in where you can fit it in,
Right.
because you have a lot on your plate.
We do.
So do what you can do to work it in where it can be worked in.
Here's the tactical practicality that will be facing us as a management team. When we start to look at the budget that you're going to see next June, that's a budget that's going to cover us in the new building and in this building. Do we want to be paying liability insurance on 2 buildings? Do we want to be paying heat and utilities on 2 buildings? Do we want to worry about water leakage here? Do we want to worry about vandalism? And oh, by the way, in the back of my mind, there's that question that came up from the state historical society about the
Yes.
approval over there. So,
Yes.
so this is the beginning of a long
Yes.
conversation.
Yes.
But we do have some practical, tactical things that we need to start thinking about what our choices are for the budgetary considerations that we're facing in less than a year. Okay?
Yes.
All right, this is another, please think about, and I don't want you to answer today, but in December, you will approve an ordinance for your meeting dates for 2022. And the question I have before you, you don't need to answer it tonight, but I may email you with this so we can get the ordinance together. Do you want to stick with the historical Tuesday, second Tuesday of the month? Or is the second Wednesday of the month a preferred date? Do you prefer a different week? Third Tuesday or Wednesday of the month? And is 7 o'clock still the right time? Just
Are we gonna be meeting here? I think is one
We
of
will be
the,
meeting here unless this pandemic kicks into what it looked like in the summer of 2020. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, we anticipate being right here ongoing. So again, you don't have to answer it now, but I think what we've typically done is put it before you in December. If you want to change anything, we do it right there. And what I'd like to do is have it nailed down in November so we can bring you a clean ordinance in December. Okay?
Okay.
And then I asked Tabitha, I know we'll get to the departmental reports, but I know the WISE team has been working for months on ready to learn kits, and different ones of our early literacy librarians have been working on these, and they were reporting to you this month, and I said, I think it's so valuable to maybe bring a sample. So you can see that. And that's my last note, unless you have questions.
Thanks, Claudia.
I just want to comment that I did attend one of the virtual community updates. The first one, I believe, was very well done. It's very informative. And anybody who watches it certainly is up to date as to what's going on with the building.
Sue and the marketing team get credit for pulling that wonderful event, set of events together. So,
Yeah.
It is on the website currently, if you haven't seen it. And if you, even if you just watch the little video that we put together, this show the progress so far on the site.
Sue and the marketing. team,
Yeah, it was
and
really-
and always Alex.
Always Alice. Anything.
I don't know if we get one of these.
Tabitha,
What other
you wanna
questions
add
did
it?
you get, just so you don't have to do any extra work and email me, like what other?
We got questions about would the tax levy be reduced and the amount of paid off? And we answered that, so that's a trustee decision, and here's the factors that will go into that. In fact, some of these Q&A we're gonna put.
Oh,
We have
like you would,
questions on the
like,
website.
okay.
Each gonna compile, or we will for you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we already have compiled those
yeah,
together.
so
We have
just
that.
stay tuned and we'll get the rest.
If you want.
So were they
Right for
more
Target.
those kind of questions?
Yeah,
And then
you know,
like,
somebody wants to
No,
know,
you gotta
having a maker space,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
maker state, yeah. Okay.
Very, very few. I mean, some who were just real simple, you know, it's going to be, you know, how many handicap parking spaces we have, for instance, things like
'Cause
that.
I was kind of surprised, and I don't know if my husband signed up, not me, and I don't know if he was on the last one. I think he might have been. Jason Cooper told us a lot about plants. so
He sure did.
So before we get too far afield, I did want to give Tabitha a chance to give you some background on this if you have questions or if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so I said in my report, this is a super collaborative effort. Anytime we make kits like these, it's like literally so many hands are touching these. The idea started well before I started here, obviously. So Kate, Ann, Trisha, Sarah, and Jeannie, all in YS, and myself at the tail end of it, have all been working on these in our department. But we also worked with marketing to create the tags, metadata technology and metadata services to do all of the processing, and now patron services will be our helpers while we check them in. So these are truly a collaborative interdepartmental effort anytime you make these. And in August, we went to, a few staff members and I went to the kids training, which is kindergarten readiness for Illinois. And that kind of determines, it's the tool that kindergarten teachers use to determine if a child is ready for kindergarten. And there's lots of different standards that they use to determine that. So you'll see at the very front of the kit, right here, it says develop skills, and all of these are based on the kindergarten readiness standards that the kindergarten teachers use. So we sort of changed the wording to make it a little bit easier to understand, but those are all based on those learning practices, and we are planning on continuing to make more of these kits in the future. So they've already been well received by the community. Lots of Facebook posts have been made about it, which is kind of cool to see. So they're great.
I have to add my own editorial comment here. When Tabitha said collaborative team effort, patron services willingness to check these in content, tech services willingness to process them. A lot of times that's a barrier for libraries actually getting these kits ready to go. So it's something I have always appreciated about the teams here. The willingness to put the need for this level of literacy and learning ahead of some of the teaming that goes along with getting these kits ready. So thank you all. And all right,
Yeah, they're great.
I have another related question.
of course.
In Tabitha's report, I believe it's a report, she talks about low interaction with our educator newsletters. And she said it costs $70 every month. What exactly was that? Who would get those?
So basically, at the beginning of the pandemic, we signed every educator up who we knew their email address for based on the services we were providing prior to the pandemic. We signed them up for an educator newsletter. It was also for homeschool, that homeschool population. So there was quite a few people receiving this newsletter. And basically the data we used to discontinue it was we sent a survey asking teachers just if they liked the newsletter, a little bit of information just to like, what would you like to see in this newsletter? And very few actually filled out the survey. Out of hundreds, I think it was like less than 10.
Wow.
So that was very telling to us that we were spending a lot of time developing these really great newsletters for not a lot of interaction. So we decided to allocate that staff time to other projects and do this quarterly instead.
Good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Put me back on someone still looking at. the-
Well, I just wanted to say that I left work early so I could go to youth services, which I have not been to for quite a while because of the pandemic. I had my grandson being in Taekwondo on Saturdays, and I don't come here with him anymore. Because I wanted to see about the interaction on the floor and
Oh,
everything.
my kids love it.
That was great.
My kids love it. They
I love
run
it.
through the library, stepping on everything, looking for the hidden thing.
As long as
Couple times a
Michelle,
week.
as I say, as long as Michelle Cook is here. Adult Services this past month, we introduced the in-person programming. And that's huge. We're not doing that with the kids yet. And this is a preview for next month, but I'm hoping you might just comment as long as you're here, because I know you don't make every meeting on the citizenship work. That's
Oh,
going
sure.
on. 'Cause
So,
that's a wonderful story, and she may not be here next month to tell you.
yes, tomorrow, we're doing our first, William Diaz-Rico is our ESL coordinator, and he kind of got started in that role right when the pandemic basically hit. So we had planned to do spring back some conversation groups, citizenship programming, that type of thing. When the pandemic hit, we're like, well, like, that's not an audience, what we need for that stuff there. And he made a contact with, I'm creating the Bureau of Immigration Services or something of that nature. And they're going to be doing an online program with us tomorrow about just what that naturalization.
But you had how many registrants?
A week ago, we had one person signed up who was a staff member. And truthfully, she was interested in the program, so it wasn't just that. So Lori and I discussed some things, and I had some contacts at Levy, he had some contacts at others at the page. We also talked to Alyssa Services about anyone from the schools, so he sent out some quick emails, and now we are up to, I believe, when we checked this afternoon, we were up to 24 registered.
Wow.
So this is first chance really doing a program, so I think we're excited to get that rolling and see what cool, how many we end up with. That one's a virtual one, 90%. So we're doing a kind of mix of both right now.
That
sounds exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. We're jazzed to get so many people.
That's great.
So.
All right, well, thank you so much. Anything else on departmental reports?
Yeah, on the patron services, I appreciate the follow-up and the expansion on the explanation as to why we seem to have a lot more card members now than we did a while back. We talked about that briefly on prior meetings. This certainly laid out in detail exactly why that happened and how it happened. And I appreciate the extra bit of knowledge provided there.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, and also one more question in the marketing section of the newsletter is the next reads emails. Total subscribers are now at 461. That's just one section. Anyway, what exactly is that? Is that where you track people or people sign up, giving you their interest, and then you send out emails or text or something indicating that, well, you look into this area you're interested in, you might want to read it? Is that how that works?
Yeah, there's a variety. Go ahead, you guys.
Yeah, I can do it because it's the reader's advisory emails, right? Yeah, so those are, and I don't know exactly how it's counted, but I'm assuming it's everyone who subscribes to the newsletter. But those are, and you can see on the website, you can sign up for specific genres to get emailed out from the library. It's actually the library staff goes through the different genres. So there's a romance one. I actually do the fiction one. Mystery, yeah, I'm playing the mystery one.
I don't do it.
Yeah,
I
general
like it.
fiction, or she registered. So it's just kind of like properties list. So you can get that, some are bi-weekly, some are monthly. Christy and staff. Hopefully we'll run that.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask how often they go out. I mean, it's just like every 2 weeks or once a month or something. So you're not.
It depends on the genre that you sign up for. So there's like, if you, an example would be, we actually send out the New York Times bestsellers. So if you get that, you get that. But for the other ones, it's probably, I want to say once a month for all the genre ones, but I might have to really right on that. But I seem to do it once a month. So on the one I handle with.
You can sign up for the service through the website.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, I think we're moving on to, the last item. We need a motion to go into closed session.
Do we have any reason to?
We do.
Oh, I didn't know that. All right, I move to go into closed session.
Will you, will you do the
Well, I
honors
don't
and read the
have it.
language,
I don't
or
have it
somebody
yet.
else?
Someone else is gonna have to read it.
Okay, Julie will do it.
I move to go into closed session to discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity.
Okay, and this is
I'll
a,
second.
thank you, Kent, a roll call vote. It says,
President Allison Boyd,
yes.
Vice President Kim Marshall,
Yes.
Treasurer Kristen Walsh,
Yes.
Secretary Julie Walsh Schmidt,
Yes.
Trustee Jennifer Erickson,
Yes.
Trustee Kelly Sims,
Yes.
Trustee Sue Wiggins.
Yes. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break while we transition to closed session.